Filmspotting is presented by Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the show description and use code FILMSPOT25, that's FILMSPOT25, to receive your discount.
How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
You're not interested in art?
No.
Now look, we're going to do this thing. We're going to have a conversation.
From Chicago, this is Filmspotting. I'm Adam Kempenaar.
And I'm Josh Larson.
So listen, here's the deal. This is what we should do. You should get off the train with me here in Vienna and come check out the town.
What?
Come on, it'll be fun.
30 years ago, Jesse met Celine on the train to Vienna, and the rest is movie history.
This week, we spend a night and a day with Ethan Hawke's Jesse and Julie Delpy's Celine as we revisit both 1995's Before Sunrise and 2004's Before Sunset.
And our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon concludes with 1983's Nostalghia. It's all ahead.
You're going to miss that plane, Josh.
Don't say that. I actually have a plane to catch on Filmspotting.
Just in time. You found me just in time.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Welcome to Filmspotting. It's a nice bit of coincidence spotting this week, Josh, which we may get into more later. We're closing out our Andrei Tarkovsky Marathon with Nostalgia, and we're embarking on a little bit of a nostalgia fest ourselves by revisiting 2 films from our past, 2 films we love, Richard Linklater's Before Sunrise and Before Sunset.
And nostalgia for our Filmspotting Fest, which is only a few months old.
That's right. Exactly. Back in March, we closed the first ever Filmspotting Fest with a 30th anniversary screening of Before Sunrise. That was at the Music Box in Chicago, and that was pretty magical. You're right. I'm already reminiscing about that day on a Sunday back in March. After the movie, critic Scott Tobias from The Next Picture Show and The Reveal joined us, along with our producer Sam Van Hallgren, to talk about the film. We'll share that conversation later in the show, along with the conclusion of our Tarkovsky Marathon. All that and Massacre Theater.
First, we're going to mess with the chronology a bit here. I don't think Linklater would mind. He has a habit of doing that himself. Before Sunset, it celebrated its 20th anniversary last year, and we're revisiting it now as part of our Pantheon project. This is our effort to review every film in the Filmspotting Pantheon. And I like how Sam is phrasing this here, eccentrically assembled movie hall of fame. I think that's accurate and sounds kind of nice. Before Sunset, along with the other 2 films in the Before trilogy, was added to the Pantheon back in 2016. That's when we did our top 5 Richard Linklater scenes. 3 of your top 5, Adam, were from the Before trilogy, including 2 from Sunset. I think I had 2 picks from this trilogy in my top 5. Before Sunset came to theaters in June 2004, 9 years after its predecessor. The movie went on to become one of the best reviewed of the year. Unlike the first film, which was written by Linklater and Kim Krizan, Sunset is credited to stars Hawke and Delpy, along with Linklater. And although we may think of the first 2 films in the trilogy as having similar structures, there's a couple walking and talking over a single day or a night in the case of Before Sunrise, Before Sunset is meant to take place more or less in real time. Basically, the 90 or so minutes before Hawke's Jesse, now married and a successful author, is scheduled to catch his plane back home from Paris. Let's hear a clip.
Look, I'm just so happy, all right, to be with you. I am. I'm so glad you didn't forget about me. Okay?
No, I didn't. And it pisses me off, okay? You come here to Paris, all romantic and married, okay? Screw you. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to get you or anything. I mean, all I need is a married man. There's been so much water under the bridge. It's not even about you anymore. It's about that time, that moment in time that is forever gone. I don't know.
You say all that, but you didn't even remember having sex, so...
Of course I remembered.
You did?
Yes. Women pretend things like that. I don't know.
They do?
Yeah, what was I supposed to say? That I remember the wine in the park and us looking up at the stars fading away as the sun came up. We had sex twice, you idiot.
Even though I was in full-on pretentious film guy mode in 1995, or aspired to be anyway, I couldn't claim to be a Richard Linklater fan. I'm not 100% sure I knew his name at that point. Growing up in Iowa, I definitely wouldn't have seen Slacker yet, and even though I surely had seen Dazed and Confused, I didn't know enough to know it was great. I probably plucked the Before Sunrise VHS case off the shelf of my local video store on the strength of that sexy cover. Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy facing each other, arms intertwined, and Hawke, who I remembered from Explorers, loved in Dead Poets Society, and may have even enjoyed in Waterland when I was going through my Jeremy Irons phase. Yes, dear listeners, I swooned over it. In this age of endless IP, it's hard to imagine anymore getting overprotective about movies and the sanctity of certain characters and stories. But when I heard that Linklater planned to make a sequel, I was shaken. On one hand, by this point, I did know enough to know that Dazed and Confused was great, and yeah, Before Sunrise was brilliant, and Waking Life blew my mind, so Linklater had earned the credibility to go back to that artistic well. Also, a major part of Before Sunrise's brilliance is how much you enjoy just hanging out with Jesse and Celine. Of course I'll take any opportunity to spend more time with them. On the other hand, Before Sunrise was perfect, with an ending that was perfect. Why would Linklater risk ruining perfection? All my fellow Gen Xers who were worried about George Lucas destroying their childhoods a few years prior, well, Linklater was possibly about to destroy this Xer's young adulthood. The filmmaker frames the dilemma pretty well himself in Before Sunset, in the opening sequence at the bookstore. Jesse, who has written about his personal experience with Celine, just as Linklater had transformed his personal experience with a woman he met on a train traveling through Europe, naturally gets asked the big question. Do the two characters get back together again in 6 months like they promised each other? To which Jesse evasively but eloquently replies, "It's a good test, right? If you're a romantic or a cynic." The implication seems clear enough. If you believe they met again in Vienna in 6 months, then you're a romantic. If you believe they didn't meet, then you're a cynic. I was sure they met again in 6 months, but I was also sure that I was perfectly content to let Jesse and Celine live on forever in my imagination. The possibility of that affair to remember future meetup was satisfying enough. Or so I thought. Josh, how did you fare on the Before test? Are you a romantic or a cynic? And how grateful are you that Linklater, Hawke, and Delpy granted us more time with these two?
Here's my level of cynicism, as best as I can recall seeing this in 2004, is I was less thinking about what I wanted, but thinking about what is the answer Linklater is going to give in this movie that I'm currently watching that's going to be satisfying. I was too much in my own head and maybe not lost enough in the characters' heads, despite having loved Before Sunrise. I think at the time I was probably, folding my arms a little bit about the sequel question, working at that point as a film critic, and also, just wondering, why is someone like Linklater doing this? But I do think the movie must have won me over pretty quickly, because the lead to my eventual review was, when talk is an aphrodisiac, who wants the conversation to stop? So whatever skepticism I had, the movie overcame for sure. I think I still probably did not appreciate it as much as I should have at the time. And that's what made this revisit so wonderful. And the knowledge that there's still a Before Midnight, which now I want to revisit again and likely discover that I underestimated that one, even though I liked it, but far less than these two installments, the first two installments. They pull off something of a miracle here, and they do it so lightly, so seemingly effortlessly, yet when you watch this conversation unfolding over these 90 minutes closely, you realize how intricate and strategic it is, and how it shifts and ebbs and flows in ways that I imagine improvisation was involved, but I think there had to be long discussions among the three of them about the superstructure and the journey that they wanted these characters to go on over the course of Before Sunset, and then just laying out how they're going to shift from one step to the other, and then maybe allowing the improvisation to get them there. But this is something of a miracle in the way they make it flow so naturally, rooted in the same characters we know so intimately, and achieve something so monumental and complete and cohesive, coming down to this perfect ending as well. So
Yes.
yeah, that was my memory of my first encounter with it, and even appreciating it at the time, now realizing I underestimated it at the time.
Yeah, how about that? Not only pulling off the miracle of making another masterpiece, and I think it is, after making one with the first film, but another perfect ending, which is what happens here.
Maybe even a better ending.
Maybe
honestly.
even a better ending. And I realized this time too, it's the exception to the rule of sequels, which is, and I had forgotten this. I hadn't seen this film, I think, since 2013. That's at least the last time I logged it. That was in preparation for Before Midnight. I had forgotten that early on in the film, we see flashbacks, we see cuts back to the first film. And that is a dead giveaway with sequels, that if they're cutting back to footage from the first film, then you know it's a disaster.
Let me tell you, after having just come out of Final Reckoning a few days before, to be reminded that this was an element in Before Sunset, I was like, oh boy,
Right.
oh boy.
Yeah,
But they
Linklater-
managed to even redeem that.
I know, Linklater again, just proving all those conventions wrong. But it really isn't by accident. It is all in the structure. And can I just say, I love that there's a moment, and I didn't clock where it exactly happens, but maybe it's about 20 minutes in on their walk. They have not hit, I think it's still before they finally hit the cafe that Celine is dragging Jesse to, where they're going to sit down and talk after they've left the bookstore. And they're talking, and finally Jesse just stops and says, this is surreal. This is surreal that we're talking after all this time. And I love that the movie takes that beat, because for every one of us who have waited 9 years to see these characters get back together, surreal's the only way to describe it. We're feeling the same way those characters are, right? To see them back together, having these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, and confronting that is not just a meta element either, reverberating the audience's desires. It's also how that conversation had to go, because this was not Jesse and Celine until they get to the point of brutal honesty, dropping all facades, and just going at it. And this is another thing where, watching this again, and I'm looking up as you were talking, and I think I did revisit it for that list as well. Last time was about a little over 10 years ago, but I had forgotten this. It starts a little shaky here for me, at least, and it's a rough start maybe for any of us who thought Jesse was a bit pretentious in Before Sunrise, because we open just on him, people fawning over him at his book signing as he waxes philosophical, and I'm thinking, oh boy, this is like the worst of Jesse, and we're leading with this, but it's all a setup. It's all a setup, I believe, because it's making us realize that when Celine shows up, we see how integral she is to who he is, and that this is the magic of these movies. It's who they are together that is what matters. What these films are all about. It's that chemical space between them. It's not about either individual. She's nice about his book release and everything, but also starts to call him out on his BS. But she also appreciates the dreamer who's behind the BS, right? She brings out the best in him. He brings out the best in her. He calls her on some of her BS. And then you see, here's the other element, the way he looks at her gets us to fall back in love with him. So I really think that Linklater is setting us up by shoving Jesse in our face in the beginning. And maybe, some people are more positive on him than others, and maybe it's not an issue for them, but at least for me, kind of setting me up for not, and then reminding me of what the magic of these movies are about. And it's that honesty that you were getting to, Adam, when their connection reignites when they get to the question of if either one of them went to the meeting spot, right? These two have never been about niceties or pleasantries. It's about honesty. And yet here's where I'm talking about the ebbs and flows and the rhythms. So brilliant to have that moment come early on after the pleasantries, but then brilliant to also depict them backing their way into it, right? With him saying he did show up, then confessing, when she says she didn't, oh no, he didn't either, and then admitting he did. Think of the mini drama over that to get to that truth, because until they get to that truth, they're not Jesse and Celine yet. That's when they become who they are.
No, that's when the movie really takes off, without a doubt. Let me take a few things you said, and I'm going to take it maybe a little bit further, because this was the revelation for me, if you will. Maybe too strong of a word, but I'm going to go with it for now. I didn't rewatch this movie back in 2016 for the Linklater scenes list. I did in 2013 again for Midnight. And at that time, I chalked up the conceit of the film to Jesse stalling. I wrote on Letterboxd in 2013. I said it in 2016 during that top 5. Is it me, or are Jesse's repeated attempts to delay his trip to the airport the equivalent of the knight's gamesmanship in the Seventh Seal, a condemned man's maneuvers to stave off death by prolonging the sublime? He just keeps saying, right, 15 more minutes. No, I'll just take you here. We'll just go here. He's just trying to keep it going. And something struck me this time, Josh. What clued me in was the fact that early on, there's multiple references to time and not being late, and you got to catch your plane, all before they've even kind of stepped out of the bookstore. And she knows this, and yet they're talking about where they're going to go for coffee, and she says, I've got a spot. And I don't know if she says it's nearby, but she says, I've got a spot I want to take you to. And they start walking, and they must walk for a half an hour. I
noticed that too.
Right? And so that, of course, could be Linklater and Hawk and Delpy being a little bit cheeky, and I wouldn't put that past them. But I think it does connect to what was the revelation for me, and what I think might tie to what the answer was in some way, as you were getting at, for Linklater. What made it interesting? What made it interesting for him to collaborate specifically with Hawk and with Delpy on? And before anyone listening to this thinks, really, Adam, this is a revelation, you didn't pick up on this before, I'll just say, I think this may have been my third viewing of the film only. The second time was back in 2013. And in 2013, I wasn't watching it to discuss it. I was just prepping for Before Midnight. I was just refreshing myself. Also, Filmspotting PA Sophie Kempenaar already chastised me. I got up the next morning all eager to share with her what I learned watching the film again, because she loves these films and actually had just been in Paris and followed all these steps, took all of the pictures she could from all of the places they go to. And here was her response. I'm a better film critic than you. This is before Sunset 101.
Wow, harsh.
Kids say the darndest things. Okay. There is a major structural difference. And it's not just the temporal aspect, the real time or more real time approach. And I think it does change the overall experience of the two movies. And it goes back to what you're saying in terms of the reversal of the setup a little bit. Jesse really does drive the first movie. Yes, of course, the first movie is great because of their honesty and that Delpy doesn't feel like she's playing second fiddle. But Jesse is the one who gets her off the train, who makes the first move, who does initiate most of the conversations. And what happens here? Celine drives the second one. She drives this movie. She picks him up at the bookstore. She essentially gets him to leave the train. Otherwise, he's just getting in the car and going to the airport, right? She gets him to wander around Paris. And Josh, she initiates almost all of the conversations. He is a responder largely in this movie. So especially if you were someone who thought he was a little pretentious in the first film, you probably do prefer this movie. And he is. I had this same thing in my notes. Jesse, Ethan Hawke, is largely relegated. And I don't think this is a bad thing at all. I like the different dynamic between the two films. He is largely relegated to being a watcher in this movie. And that is fine because we got plenty of his pontificating in the first movie. Delpy is also so good and so incisive, and he is such a good listener. Also, the way he watches her is romantic as hell. Which is how the movie ends, of course, too, in that very sexy, romantic exchange between them where, except for one word or two words, that two-word phrase that he has, otherwise he's just looking at her.
Yeah, and there's a structural reason for that shift, but there's also a psychological, emotional one, because he's vulnerable here. By admitting that he went back and that he's the romantic, he can try to play it off, and she can try to play it off too. But it has revealed that he opened himself up more than she did. Bottom line, whatever the circumstances were, her grandmother's death and that, it's all understandable. This isn't saying one of them made the right decision, one of them made the bad decision, but he is now the more vulnerable one because of how things played out. And I think that's part of what's going into the dynamic as well. As you were talking about, time and the considerations of time, which is a huge Linklater thing, but just how it plays out in this, I just want to throw in also about the ending, the great Nina Simone song. It's actually a cover. She's, singing a jazz standard that's been on stage and in movies before. She covered it. Just in Time is the name of that song.
Of course.
And I looked up the lyrics just out of curiosity. Just in time, you found me just in time. Before you came, my time was running low.
Before you came, my time was running low. I was lost, the losing dice.
So the first two stanzas, time mentioned 3 times. It's, clearly probably why it was chosen. It's also musically perfect for the moment. And Delpy's performance in that moment, since you touched on our performance, let's go there. And I'm going to start at the ending because I'm here now. It's not only that it's seductive, but let's go back a little earlier, a few moments earlier, where she's playing her waltz. I think she calls it this waltz for him.
It's so vulnerable. How great is that?
Yeah. And she's on the guitar. And, I think what I love about that little bit is that you see she's doing it for him. And there are moments where she'll look up at him and kind of self-deprecatingly laugh. And but there's also nice little moments in the performance where she gets lost in the music. You can tell she's no longer thinking about him in these 2 seconds. She's thinking about how much she's enjoying doing this musical performance. And what does that point to? She's an artist too. This is related to the kind of shifts in the dynamic from the first film to this one. Listening to this, again, maybe an obvious observation. We'll see if Sophie has something mean to say to me, but listening to her lyrics, you realize this waltz is her version of Jesse's book. He's written this book all about their relationship. She has been true to her nature, quietly alone in her apartment, writing a song she will probably never perform to anyone else about her experience of their relationship, because it is about someone who she, basically missed out on, or there was a fleeting moment. And that's her version of the book. So Delpy is wonderful in so many different registers in that final sequence. And then she just gets some great Celine moments throughout because she gets, more of the dialogue here in a sense. I love one of my favorites might be the I'm not getting angry. Spit at him twice, which is, just kind of sums her character up in so many ways. But she's wonderful. He's great. She's wonderful. Together, there's something even better.
Let me sing you a waltz out of nowhere, out of my thoughts. Let me sing you a waltz about this one night stand. You were for me that night everything I always dreamt of in life.
What I love about that is I did register the bit of performance that it is, but I didn't make the connection back to the fact that he wrote a book and this is sort of her version of that. And the reason that I registered the active performance is I looked at my top 5 Linklater scenes. Sam had referenced it in our script notes. And so I figured, well, man, now that I've rewatched the movie, did I make the right choices? And we'll get to what one of my choices was probably here in a little bit. My number 2 choice was that ending and Baby, Are You Gonna Miss That Plane, which followed my number 3 choice, which was from Before Sunrise, where they do that whole fake phone call thing with each other. It's all about acting and performance, where they finally get to say what they really are thinking about each other, but they get to do it under the guise of performance because they are sort of playing a role, even though they really are being themselves. So there is that connection or that link between the artifice and what they're really exposing about themselves in the two films. I had never fully noticed this before, Josh, and it might be a really minor thing, but that last line, here I am again, I think being a romantic. And I realized that maybe I need to temper it again and maybe not go full blown cynic, but just temper the romanticism a little bit. I always took that last line, baby, you're going to miss that plane, as full on, I'm not letting you go. You know, you're not leaving. We both know we're meant to be together. And this is the romance of our lifetimes and our dreams. And we finally found each other again after 9 years. Isn't everything great? And I realized with Delpy's line delivery that you at least have to keep open the interpretation that it's just a statement of fact, that at this point, baby, you're going to miss that plane, that he is almost certainly going to miss that plane. And the door for him leaving is open at some point, is still open, literally and metaphorically. And I love that there is that possibility of dual meaning.
Well, she has a level of defense before just coming out and saying it, that you're going to miss that plane. I want you here. We should be together, because she delivers that line as part of her Nina Simone impersonation. Mm-hmm. She's not delivering it as Celine.
That's right.
So again, to go back to your phone conversation, that is allowing them to be honest, but in the guise of performance. Mm-hmm. I think I read this similarly. She's being honest. She wants him to miss that plane. She wants him to stay romantically, but she's still buffering it with performance. There's just a little bit of safety there. She's, again, how she's maybe distinct from Jesse, she's not allowing herself to be as vulnerable as she could by delivering the statement in that way.
Mm-hmm. I love, too, this is another thing I never really paid attention to, the shot and the scene right before they arrive, right before they get up to the apartment, the deliberation, the care that Linklater takes, that they take, the performers, as they walk up the stairs. That spiral staircase seems to take forever. And there is a sense of anticipation. There is a sense of anxiety too, though, because I think they both know that they don't know what they're about to get themselves into. We don't know, and they are not aware fully of where this could take them. But I think they fundamentally get that once they cross sort of a threshold, that threshold being the door into her apartment, who knows where this could lead, but it's a place from which they maybe can never fully come back from. And I just, the way you watch Hawk with his sort of wide-eyed, he almost looks like a kid, but there's also the kid on Christmas morning, but also a little bit afraid of what he's getting into. You see it all, and it's just a single steady cam shot that follows him up the stairs. It's really beautiful.
It's, to me, a direct callback to one of my favorite Linklater scenes from Before Sunrise, the listening booth, because what it is built upon are them taking turns looking at each other when the other one is not, and looking away. And each note hits what you're describing, the hesitancy and the excitement. There are smiles, and then there are smiles that suddenly fade. They do catch eyes, but not the entire time. They're not locked. And that exact back and forth is what happens in the listening booth in a very similar situation. It's where they're considering how serious is this in that listening booth. They're asking themselves the same question in this staircase. And there are a couple other callbacks, or at least one other couple instances of a particular callback. I know we've talked about the touching or almost touching
I wanted to go
Celine's hair in Before Sunrise. We talked about, how this is possibly stolen when we since watched and discussed Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7 and Cleo and Antoine. That happens with them. I think it's on the tram here in Before Sunrise where Jesse tentatively reaches out for Celine's hair and then takes his hand away. I love the moment where they're walking up some stairs and these leaves are falling around them. It's kind of like an outdoor staircase. And he reaches out. I rewound it a couple times and I almost wonder if it's improvised, because he reaches out and it looks like a leaf maybe is falling behind her head, and you can't tell if he knocks it away or grabs it or just pulls his hand back. But then she does it. So now it becomes, here we're back to the dynamic flipping. In the car near the end, she reaches out to just touch his head. but stops. So
Yes.
just a lovely callback to one of this series' loveliest moments.
Yes, and that really stood out to me this time. That was my number 5. I referenced it earlier. My number 5 was the car scene. Linklater scene. I was fine until I read your effing book. And what's so great about that scene is partly that that's where it really does get real. They're being honest with each other in different ways. It builds throughout, but it builds to this scene where they both get brutally honest with each other, where the emotions come out. Remember, she at one point really wants to get out of the car. He has to almost restrain her from getting out of the car. Right.
I think it's where she's her most vulnerable is why it gets so real is now she has put herself in the same position he was when he admitted he came back and tried to meet.
Yeah. And at one point, I think earlier in that scene, he almost touches her to try to comfort her. It's not quite the gesture that she's going to make. And it's not quite the gesture he makes that everyone remembers from Before Sunrise. But then after he finally exposes his vulnerability and reveals how rough his life is at the moment, that's when she reciprocates the gesture from across almost a decade now and across movies to Before Sunrise. And Josh, what stands out about that is that it's not just Linklater being clever and going, well, Jesse did it in the first movie, so Celine's going to do it here. Of course, she's the one who's doing it here. She's the one who is driving the entire film. She's the more active, dominant presence. It makes sense that she would be the one who would almost comfort him in that moment. But there's more. Remember his line earlier in the film. And I'll just say this too. There is something I had also kind of put in the back of my brain about this film, thinking about it as purely romantic, even though knowing that there were moments of brutal honesty. There is a certain melancholy and bittersweetness that they bring up over and over again about the 9 years they lost. I didn't really latch onto that, but that is real. This, why didn't we do this? And that regret, those 9 years being gone. And Hawk says, not too long before the scene in the car, if somebody would touch me, I would dissolve into molecules.
That was a great line.
That then raises the stakes when she almost touches him, right? It's not just that it's reversed and that she's the one, it makes sense, would do that as the dominant presence. But what if she does touch him there? They have that hug and she asks him, doesn't she? Are you dissolving or something along those lines? She calls back to it. She does. I wanted to ask you this, or bring it up, and I'll throw it out to the listeners too, because I just ran out of time at the last minute, and I guess it's kind of silly to bring up something that I could just answer myself, but doesn't Before Sunrise end with kind of a lovely little montage of the different locations?
Yeah, visiting the spots they travel to. Yeah.
So here's another reversal. Doesn't Before Sunset actually begin with hitting the spots that they go to? It's like it's foreshadowing. It's setting you up rather than looking back, which is lovely. And what clued me into that was I saw that they go to the cafe. I saw the sign of the cafe and I started to realize, oh, some of these spots are familiar. And of course, those are the spots they end up going to. So something about the camera there telling us ahead of time, Linklater cluing us in ahead of time, as if this stuff maybe was almost fated in some way and laid out before us, just seems so perfect, especially with all the conversations they're having about time and everything happening sort of simultaneously.
Yeah, a nice touch and also a nice counter to how this movie ends, which is then a fade to black as action is still taking place, but it now becomes private. You know, it's like we need to leave them to be together now, and this movie needs to end.
Another nice little flourish, and this is what I'll close on. That bookstore moment when they ask him a question about what he's working on next, and Jesse goes off on this thing he'd always had wanted to write, and he's waxing about how time is a lie. And
the pop song,
everything's happening within that moment somehow. But Josh, it really is a beautiful thing that I never fully hear again put together, that he's narrating this story. And what he's saying is all his life is just folding into itself. And it's obvious to him that time is a lie, that it's all happening all the time. And inside every moment is another moment, all happening simultaneously. And at that moment, he's saying that is when he sees her. And so he's having this moment where he's thinking about a book that he might write at some point, but it's also a book that he's thought about many times throughout his life. He's seeing her, which is happening in the present, but then he's probably potentially thinking about, who knows, a future with her that might even just be the next 20 minutes of them reuniting. But then he's thinking about the night they had 9 years ago. And we know he's thinking about that because of course he is, but also Linklater shows us those memories in his head. All of it's happening simultaneously, time collapsing in that moment.
Yeah. And I like how she's almost a vision there, standing there where you do, which I think almost he does, a little double take. Is she really there? Is this really, like she's somehow transported through time to be there, even though it's completely logical that she is.
I said I was going to close there, but two other just really quick things. At the beginning of Before Sunrise, they have that married couple that gets into a fight with each other
on the train.
And then here you have Ethan Hawke saying that line about the couple being divorced at 52. And it's just interesting to think about those two encounters, that exchange at the beginning of Sunrise and that line here in Sunset, as we look forward to what may happen in Before Midnight. The other thing that is a totally random aside, but it just kind of strikes me as hilarious. And I've mentioned this one time on the show before. You may remember, Josh, that I discovered pretty randomly, actually, that back in 2017 or something, PBS did a documentary about Richard Linklater, looking at his career up to that point. And I found out that, unbeknownst to me, they used audio from the early days of Cinecast, that you can hear my voice and Sam's voice in this documentary. They don't reference Cinecast or anything. It's just part of a montage. But Sam has a couple lines. I have one line. And we're just dogging Linklater.
Great.
So I'm getting ready to watch Before Sunset. And of course, I'm doing what most of us do now. I'm about to bring it up on some VOD platform. And then I go, wait a second, I have the Before trilogy on Criterion. I should put the disc in. I watch it. And then I think, well, I've got the Criterion disc. I wonder what the bonus features are. I go to the supplements. The first supplement is this PBS documentary.
Oh, no.
And I go, wait a second, are you kidding me? Is this the thing? And I start fast forwarding through it. And there it is at the 71-minute mark. They're at the point where they're doing this montage, this really quick montage, talking about how Linklater was at this point in his career where he was kind of unbankable. He'd had some movies that weren't making money and critics weren't big on them, like Bad News Bears and Fast Food Nation, though ironically, I liked Fast Food Nation. I think Sam did too. And there it is. I'm finally on a Criterion Collection disc. I'm featured, not so featured, but you know what I mean. I'm included in a Criterion Collection disc of one of my all-time favorite films, and it's me insulting the filmmaker because I'm tearing down the Bad News Bears.
Not really fair, but there it is to humble.
It's not. Before Sunset is currently available VOD on most platforms and in that shrink-wrap Criterion Collection edition of the Before trilogy you have in case of emergency.
Listening is the number one thing you can do to support an independently produced show like Filmspotting. There are a couple more things you can do. You can take a minute to give us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Doesn't matter if you're a first-time listener or have been listening for 20 years. Every new review helps us reach new listeners. Another way to support us, join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. We want to thank family member Susie in St. Paul.
Susie writes she's been listening for years. Her favorite review or segment, top 5 movies with beaches, or did I dream that? Not a dream. Josh, episode 834, top 5 beach scenes inspired by M. Night Shyamalan's Old, which it says we did not review, but I don't remember doing that top 5. I feel like you talked about Old and maybe you had a guest host?
There might have been a guest, yes. I know I've reviewed it, and I think I talked about it on the show.
A review we got wrong. You didn't get it wrong, but watch Josh O'Connor in God's Own Country and you will be enthralled. We believe you.
Can we just do a Josh O'Connor mini marathon?
We should.
I feel like there's a handful we need to catch up with, both of us.
There are listeners around the world right now fist pumping that you said that. A favorite that she revisited recently, 12 Angry Men, a random film she loved, Scorsese's After Hours, a movie she credits with becoming a cinephile. I think this is one for a lot of people out there, Cinema Paradiso, and a book about movies that she loves, Get Happy, The Life of Judy Garland. Thank you, Susie, for being part of the family and for all those years of listening. In addition to keeping us doing what we're doing, your support comes with perks. You get to listen early and ad-free. You get our weekly newsletter. You get exclusive opportunities like being part of the Filmspotting Family Discord, and you get access to our monthly bonus shows. We did just drop in the feed our quarterly Filmspotting Advisory Board meeting, and coming very soon, the May bonus show that we just recorded, our draft with Madness Bracket contest winner, Ricky Kendall, directors who are no longer with us, which was a blast.
A lot of fun. I think we mostly came away happy, everyone.
Yeah, all of us
did. And I feel like a recent draft went that way too. We've got to pick a more contentious topic for our next draft.
Maybe so.
So we get some anger going.
You can learn more about joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. By the time people hear this, Josh, this movie won't be available at a Regal Cinema, but I still want to call it out because they have these types of special engagements all the time, and this just ran for about a week at Regal Cinemas, one of my favorite Miyazaki films. I think an underrated Miyazaki film, perhaps, Kiki's Delivery Service. Would love to have seen that on the big screen. Of course, you highlighted last week Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I will be seeing that on the big screen this weekend and ready to talk about it next week. Friendship, smaller movie, still one you should see on the big screen if you get the chance, and you might have the chance to see it for free with Regal Unlimited, the all-you-can-watch movie subscription pass that pays for itself in just 2 visits. Right now, Regal is offering Filmspotting listeners endless movies for less. If you sign up for Regal Unlimited using code FilmSpot25, you'll get 10% off a 3-month subscription. Regal Unlimited is the only truly limitless movie subscription pass. You get to see any standard 2D movie anytime with no blackout dates or restrictions. Have I mentioned Sinners still available at Regal Cinemas as well? One you have to see in a theater. And with Regal Unlimited, you won't just save money on tickets, you'll also save on snacks. Regal Unlimited members get 10% off all non-alcoholic concessions. Sign up now in the Regal app or at the link in the description for this podcast and use code FilmSpot25 to receive your discount.
Is anyone out there?
Another salesperson enduring the endless search. Exhausting. If you want to get right to the right conversations, you need LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Whether you're looking for new leads or strengthening existing relationships at your top accounts, get right to the right conversations with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Try LinkedIn Sales Navigator now with a free 60-day trial at linkedin.com/trial. That's linkedin.com/trial.
Terms and conditions apply!
Our lives are the sum of our choices. This is your calling, your destiny. I have no regrets. Neither should you.
That's from the trailer for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning, which comes to theaters this weekend. We do plan to have a review of that on next week's show, but not with you, Josh, because you will be off in Japan with your lovely bride of how many years at this point? Care to share?
I mean, long enough that it sounds very strange for you to say bride, but yes,
I know. That's why I asked you to clarify.
Debbie and I have been married for 30 years, so we are doing it big and spending about 2 weeks in Japan. Really, actually, the truth is I was not allowed to be on this show because I really strongly dislike The Final Reckoning.
I was going to say you have a reckoning with this installment of the Mission Impossible franchise.
I hope, it seems mixed. So I'm hoping either you or Michael do go for it and have a good debate about it, because I know there are big fans of the series that this one did still work for.
We will see. My guest host will be Michael Phillips from the Chicago Tribune, along with a review of The Final Reckoning. We will share our top 5 movie stunts. That's a tie-in with the MI Films, of course, but also with the recent-ish announcement that the Oscars will be including a Best Stunt category, starting with the 2028 ceremony. Here's where I'm at, Josh, right now. I recently posted in the Filmspotting Discord, what is a movie stunt? What qualifies? What are the parameters?
Oh, man.
Are there technicalities?
You're lost in the weeds already.
I'm already lost in the weeds.
Good luck.
Does it have to be a human who's involved? Are we allowed to think of them as stunt sequences, or is it a single event? It's tough.
You're going to have to get back to me on that, or I'll just listen on my flight back.
Yeah. Also next week, results from the current Filmspotting poll. We're asking you to choose the single greatest actor or actress from the last 25 years. Currently in the lead, apparently people were swayed by my choice, the number one overall pick from our draft of the actors of the century. You can vote in that poll and leave a comment at filmspotting.net. And if you would like to check out our schedule of future shows, visit filmspotting.net/episodes. Josh, you're out for 2 weeks. You're also going to have a meetup with a good group of Filmspotting listeners in Japan, which will set the record for the farthest flung Filmspotting meetup. Congrats.
Can't wait. Yeah, it's going to be in Tokyo. And we have, I thought, what are the chances? Do we have anyone there? At least 10 folks have signed up to join us. So yeah, we'll definitely be reporting back on that, or follow us both on Instagram, and I'll be sure to put up some pictures.
If you go to filmspotting.net/episodes, you'll see that after Michael, Aisha Harris is going to join the show. Really fun show planned with her. Clueless for its 30th anniversary, and our top 5 movie quotes in our lexicon, like the phrases that we actually use or have used regularly in our lives. So it might be a lot of inside jokes, and we'll just look at each other with blank faces like we don't know what you're referencing. We'll see.
But your families and close friends will get a kick out of it. So that's all that matters.
That's exactly right. Again, that's filmspotting.net/episodes.
Quick note about our sister podcast, The Next Picture Show, looking at cinema's present via its past. It is part 2 of their Less Than Hero pairing. So they're discussing the latest MCU installment, which has been getting pretty good reviews, Thunderbolts. Previously, they discussed 1999's Mystery Men, so they'll really do some of the comparing and contrasting on this new latest episode. You can find those every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Time now for Massacre Theater, where we perform a scene and you get a chance to win a Filmspotting prize. Last time, we massacred this scene.
I believe the most likely outcome will be our collective demise.
Not if we strictly follow the rules of time travel. That means no talking to our past selves, no betting on sporting events.
I'm going to stop you right there, Scott. Are you seriously telling me that your plan to save the universe is based on Back to the Future? Isn't it?
No.
Good, you had me worried there, because that'd be horseshit. That's not how quantum physics works.
Tony, we have to take a stand.
We did stand, and yet here we are.
I know you got a lot on the line. You got a wife, a daughter. But I lost someone very important to me. A lot of people did. And now, we have a chance to bring her back, to bring everyone back. And you're telling me that you won't even...
That's right, Scott, I won't.
Speaking of the MCU, that was Robert Downey Jr. and Paul Rudd, as well as a few others who we didn't perform. The scene comes from 2019's Avengers Endgame, written by Stephen McFeely and Christopher Marcus, directed by Anthony and Joe Russo.
That Massacre was part of our top 25 films of the century show a couple of weeks back. Endgame did not make either of our lists. In fact, not a single MCU film made our lists. Josh, so why that scene? Well, of course, listeners have answers.
Here's Dylan Dom in Blair, Nebraska, the highest grossing movie of the century paired with the best.
Robert Gibbons in Kaysville, Utah has a good answer. The connections are: 1, it was the top grossing or one of the top grossing movies in the last 25 years, which ties into your best of list, yeah. And 2, you found a way to bring back the movies that were destroyed in Filmspotting madness, just like the Avengers brought back the people snapped by Thanos.
Indeed. Here's Addison Alley from Salt Lake City, Utah. Time heist. I am expecting a brimming infinity gauntlet of answers for this Avengers Endgame scene, a movie that was actually so good for its time that it retroactively made people believe the MCU had been nothing but masterpieces before that point, and prospectively mediocre and terrible. The charm of seeing massive superhero team-ups has since faded, but gee boy howdy did this work in 2019.
And here's Michael Rosh in New York, New York. Of course, the scene is from that obscure little film Avengers Endgame. The tie-in, besides the obvious oversight that kept the film off both Adam and Josh's top 25 of the last 25 years, include the MCU's own meta look back Also, Downey Jr. won an Oscar last year for a film by Christopher Nolan, a director who showed up on both of your lists. I also believe you renamed Scott Lang Peter as a nod to Paul Rudd being in the newer Ghostbusters films. Peter, of course, was Bill Murray's character, and you opened the show on a Murray monologue from Lost in Translation. Funny that. Didn't we go with Peter because we were just thinking about I Love You, Man?
I think that's it. And Spider-Man and Peter Parker. But yeah, this works just as well.
That works actually the best. We'll go with that, Michael. Thank you. Josh, go ahead and reach into that pretty brimming film spotting hat and pick out this week's winner.
Our winner is Dave Allen from Parts Unknown, who, joins in with the Thunderbolts praise, saying here, I'm not sure if you guys are planning to watch or review Thunderbolts, but I think it's the best Marvel movie since Shang-Chi.
How about that, Dave? We don't know where you're from, but we will, if you send us your address, get you a Filmspotting t-shirt or a Filmspotting tote bag or a trial membership to the Filmspotting family. Email us feedback@filmspotting.net.
How did I come to this?
Not again.
I played Richard III.
5 curtain calls.
There were 5 curtain calls. I was an actor once. Damn it, now look at me. Look at me! I can't go out there and I won't say that stupid line one more time.
We move on now to this week's edition of Massacre Theater. I'm going to give everybody a hint because I don't think the hat's going to be very brimming. We're apparently obsessed with this movie here on Filmspotting. I'm just going to leave it at that.
In a little last minute research, we appear to have done a scene from this film about a year ago. So there's a clue for you. We didn't discuss this beforehand, but we need to swap in a name here in your last line. Do we want to go with?
I got one.
Okay, you got one. All right.
We're going to go.
Just surprise me there.
I think that this is potentially another hint if people are really paying attention.
I was actually going to suggest the same thing.
Okay, we're on the same page.
We're on the same page there. And also here, I'll give another hint. If you have already listened or will soon listen to our Filmspotting Family bonus episode about a draft of dead directors, this title, I believe, is mentioned. The filmmaker absolutely is mentioned. The filmmaker definitely is. Comes up quite a bit. We'll say that.
Okay.
I think we've helped people out enough.
Hopefully we've dropped enough hints.
Our performances will be of no help at all.
They will be of no help. And I am going to point out that I have once again been typecast.
I mean, that or it's your strength. Well, no, it's not your strength. You're just typecast.
We could go with that. Okay, I'm going to start it off. You're going to give me the action.
And action.
Oh, but you have that look, dear. I can always tell. Now, you haven't been doing anything foolish. Well, I do hope you've forgotten all about that silly little plan of yours.
Which one?
About, blowing up the White House?
Oh, Ma, I was only fooling. Besides, what would the president say?
You're a naughty boy, Sasha. You can always make me laugh. Now get shaved before your father gets home.
Wow. And scene. Man, I don't know.
Maybe it is a position of strength.
If you add giggling, I think it becomes a position of strength for you. Nicely done.
If you know what film we just massacred, email the movie's title and your name and location to feedback@filmspotting.net. The deadline is Monday, June 1st. Robert Downey Jr. last week. This week, range.
Quite
we'll select the winner randomly from all the correct entries and announce it in a couple of weeks.
Dring, 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 dring. Pick up. Pick up the phone.
Hello.
Allô? Vanny, c'est Céline.
Ah.
Comment ça va?
Ça va bien. Et toi?
Il m'est arrivé quelque chose d'incroyable.
I've been working on my English recently. You want to talk in English just for laughs?
Yeah, okay. That's a good idea. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it for lunch today. I'm sorry.
Celine and Jesse again, this time in 1995's Before Sunrise. We revisited Sunrise just back in March. That was part of Filmspotting Fest. We closed out those wonderful 3 days, Adam, with a sold-out Sunday morning screening at Chicago's Music Box. And then after the screening, we hauled ourselves back up on stage. You and I were quite exhausted, but we leaned on producer Sam and critic and friend Scott Tobias to talk about the film. Here is that audio.
We're excited to have Scott Tobias, our friend from the Next Picture Show podcast and from The Reveal, joining us to talk about, as you heard, one of my all-time favorite movies, Before Sunrise. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great. And look at all these people sticking around for your Q&A like a bunch of sickos.
Yep. It's funny. I mentioned Friday night with Ryan Johnson, how Brick is one of these films where it's all taking place in high school and there's one cell phone in the movie, and how different the movie would be now. This is the ultimate pre-cell phone movie, right? Pre-social media film.
I think you'd have to, I was thinking about that, and I think the only way to make it work is if they both somehow drop their cell phones into the Danube. And then I think maybe you could have this work.
You do wonder, how do the kids meet these days? Like, they don't carry around books that you can say, what are you reading? It's like, what are you looking at on your phone while someone's dancing? I mean,
Yeah. So before we dive into the movie a little bit further, we've been talking to all of our guests about this is the 20th year of the show, right? So reflecting a little bit and want to share with the audience our relationship actually to you, Scott, and I guess we'll get it a little bit, your relationship to us, but your tenure with the AV Club, give us the years just so we can kind of...
I met my longtime partner and friend and editor and current cohort, Keith Phipps, in 1997 at a junket for Good Will Hunting and Scream 2. I was in college, graduate school, and he was working for the AV Club. He was part of what was a skeleton crew of 3 at the time, working out of Madison, and they were just starting up the Chicago edition and needed somebody to do the local part of that. I did not get that job, but I did start freelancing for them, and it came up in 1999 and was there, I think, until 2012 or 2014. I can't remember. And then we started The Dissolve together, which lasted for a couple of years through Pitchfork. And now we have The Reveal, which is our newsletter.
Yeah, so between 97 and 2005, when our show started, all 3 of us are reading the AV Club, reading Keith, reading Tasha Robinson, reading you. And we're thinking about, man, if we could ever get guests on the show, would we ever get a guy like Scott Tobias to pay attention to us? Honestly, that's what we thought, 100%. And I think you were maybe the second ever guest host that we had. You actually said yes and came on the show. But even before that, you listened to the show to decide whether or not you thought it was worth it. And then you wrote something very lovely about us in the AV Club that we had no idea was coming. But for us back in 2006, whenever it was very validating. So thank you.
Oh, it was great. And I have to say, you reached out to me at first, I think, when it was Cinecast. And I was like, what is this? I'm not going to do it. So it was, just a matter of me listening to the show and being completely blown away by how good the discussion was, the quality of the production, the quality of the insight, and of course it was something I was happy to recommend and then join as a guest episode about Knocked Up, I believe was what we talked about.
Right. Sam was off. You joined me for that one. 25th anniversary, we'll sit down and have a conversation. We'll devote an entire panel just to the legal dispute that caused us to change our name to Filmspotting, because I know everyone's dying to hear that. But yes, we did start as Cinecast, our first 100 episodes. So Before Sunrise, what was your relationship to it at the time it came out? Tell us about your first experience.
It's really kind of perfect because I am the same age as the characters in the movie. I think Celine says she's 23. I think that would have been when I saw it. I was 1 year out of school. It was kind of a townie at that point in Athens, Georgia. And I saw the movie at a screening at college, like a college screening. And at the time, Linklater was extremely exciting. This was, because Slacker had come out while I was an undergrad. And it was 93 was Dazed and Confused. You didn't mention, of course, I wasn't aware of his actual first film, which is what You Can't Learn to Plow by Reading Books. But in any case, I was a bit of a Ethan Hawke skeptic at the time, but I was completely wowed by the movie and extremely moved by it, and I remain so. This was powerful to see, and it's extraordinary to me that the sequels exist. I was one of those people where it was like, oh, there's going to be another Before Sunrise movie. I think 10 years later, I was like, no, what are you doing? This is what a horrible idea. And then, of course, it turns out to be...
It was not a horrible idea.
If anything, at least as good, maybe even better than this one. So, but I feel like, I've grown with it. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the film is that it is such a chronicle of a specific moment of a person's life. They have to be this age in order to have this kind of experience, in order to have that impulse to get off the train, in order to really engage not just in each other, but the idea of doing this, I think is very specific to that time and where they are in their lives. And this is a film that captures that feeling so intensely.
I think I just saw it on DVD or VHS, maybe even at the time in '95. I had to wait. It was not coming to my small town theater in Iowa. What was your experience, guys?
Yeah, for me, it was definitely a college movie. I was in college at the time, so would have seen it then. And, remember liking it, but probably having a little of that Hawk skepticism, even though. So Reality Bites, you were saying, Adam, was just before, right? Just before, and which I liked, but it's kind of, you look at him kind of like she does in this movie, a little askance at first, even though you are mesmerized by what he's saying. And so it's probably a movie that I warmed up to, but I think that's the right relationship to have with this film, as wonderful as it is to see at a young age. It's when you're maybe a little closer to that couple on the train that this movie starts to kind of burrow deeper. And it was, maybe not until, I don't know, an umpteenth viewing for when we talked about it for some, maybe it was one of those top 5 lists. I looked at it again, Adam, but realizing, does she know when she gets up to move away from them that in 20 years, before midnight, that she's going to be playing a variation of that scene with him. So spoilers, sorry for those who are just seeing this the first time.
But still have a journey to go on, everybody.
Yeah.
We promise.
All that to say is it's a movie that's wonderful if you see it at, 13 or whatever, but you're going to love it a lot more down the road. When did you see it, Sam?
So I would have been 20. It came out, you said, a limited release in the summer. So I think I had kind of an ideal viewing. It actually did come to the small theater in my town in central New Hampshire in the Lakes region. And probably it was a lovely, summer evening. And my mom and I went to see it together. So I just feel like, what I was thinking as I was here is like, this is a film I've seen many times, but something was missing. All of you. Right, just like Delpy says, there was something special about seeing it here, deeply moving. And of course, you can't extract this from the entire before enterprise at this point. The 3 films and what they meant. I think the last time I saw it was maybe right on the heels of Midnight. And I was thinking about it before this morning. If any of us are in relationships that are at all stable, happy, however you want to talk about it, maybe the last emotionally risky thing we did was initiate that conversation, that first date with the people we're still with, right? And this movie, and we'll get into maybe our favorite moments, so I'll save it
next.
But that this is a movie all about those moments of taking little leaps, of embracing that risk. And so what it makes you think, more than what makes it special as a movie is make it and how you end up reflecting on your life. My life at 20, my life at nearly 30, in my 40s. That's what makes this whole thing such a special thing.
Yeah. For all you non-Gen Xers out there, all you kids, congrats on your youth, but you didn't get to have Jesse and Celine mark the stages of your lives the way we did, right? And I really do value that and feel that that's something really special. You set us up, Sam. I think we should talk about it. There are so many great moments to choose from. We did do a top 5 Linklater scenes. We should have just done scenes from this trilogy, and maybe we can revisit that at some point. What's your favorite moment in the film? What is your favorite scene? We can kind of go down the road. Sam, did one stand out this time? Is it different than what maybe you thought it was going to be going in?
There are 3. And not scenes, moments. So these are moments, and these are all wordless moments. And I realized actually very late that what made me be able to take in these moments is that there's no score. There's music, but no score. In fact, the harpsichord, I was like, oh, there is a score. No, it's a real harpsichord being played in a garden apartment. So there are 3 moments, and they all capture what I was getting at, the terror of encountering the real. Oh shit, this is real life. And the first moment is when Jesse decides to first say something to Celine. And I don't think it's my imagination. There's a subtle push in of the camera right before he says something. So you see the choice he makes. And it's like, these are the moments where you can't not be sincere. This is such a Gen X movie. Sincerity was not something we were great at. We didn't love that.
Still aren't.
So there's that moment. And you see it on his face. And again, the camera really helps with that. There's that little push in. The listening booth scene, obviously great.
So are you going to take all of
I'm not going to take the scene. I'm not going to take the scene. I'm just going to say there is a moment. So the music starts. God, what a great scene. God. But there is a moment. The music started. As soon as we hear her voice, Celine is startled. There's a moment where she almost shakes because it's the voice, again, is singing with such sincerity that I think it wakes her up to the reality of the moment. And we've all felt that little shiver of what music can do and being in that moment with somebody. The third moment, right before the kiss. It's right before the first kiss. They're on what? What is that called that they're on? It's like it is a Ferris wheel? Okay. It has a European name probably, but...
It's very famous. It's from The Third Man.
Oh, sure, right, of course. The moment right before they actually kiss, there's been that whole great exchange about he's trying to make it cute. You see on his face, there's no other word for it. It's terror. He's like, this is real. We're really doing this. This is meaningful. And again, the lack of score. I think a score would erase those moments or your ability to connect with those moments. It's so nakedly exposed, and they're so good at capturing it. Those are my three favorite moments.
They're between, as she talks about later. You need it, and the music would ruin that.
Great film.
So yeah, lack of score. I'm going to talk about moments where there's lack of dialogue, and there's an irony there with Linklater, who is such a verbose filmmaker in so many great ways. But when we did our, you mentioned it, Adam, top 5 Ethan Hawke moments, this was episode 696, I picked on the tram that early moment where he tentatively reaches out to fix Celine's hair and then stops himself, because it's the pause that, for me, that's romantic. It's the acknowledging of where we are right now, and we're not there. And so I'm going to pause. And when we did just talked about our Pantheon review, Adam, of Cleo from 5 to 7, the Varda film, we were talking about how that extended tram scene between the two of them there is, obvious inspiration for this tram sequence. So,
and the palm reader. Did you guys think of that too?
That's right.
The palm reader, which is opens Cleo 5 to 7.
Starts with a palm reader. Yeah, I forgot about that, Sam. That's good. And so the other one, and I have the receipts for this, so I'm claiming this, and I can prove it. Sorry, Scott. But we did Linklater scenes on 581, my number one, all his filmography. Listening booth.
Listening booth.
It's the listening booth. And it's, again, no words, a word, one word. You're begging that no one says a word, because one word from two of them would ruin that. And the way we're allowed to read into their reactions, I don't know if there's any interviews that talk about rehearsals that went into that, or did Linklater just throw them into the booth and trust them? Their chemistry is obviously one of the major elements of this movie. But yeah, to let that play out, and then the choice to end it, which I had forgotten again watching it today, but that it doesn't conclude, but that song continues as then we get a few shots across the city. So yeah, for me, it's always going to be the listening booth.
I was like, nobody's going to take the listening booth. I'll salute it. Yeah, I mean, another thing I will add about the listening booth before choosing something else is I think when you have that experience of just saying, this is a really cool song, you want to listen to it, it's the most awkward thing in the world you could do, just to stand around and listen to this. And this is still at a reasonably, they still don't know each other terribly well, but there is desire there. And so you get all of that. You get that feel of, you're so uncomfortable being in that space together, yet you're feeling the flirtiness and the desire, and everything is all sort of done wordlessly. And just as a performance piece, just watching those two actors in that scene is incredible. But I'm going to just go ahead and I'll let that one go. To me, it's the it's the phone call. Because it's so funny and adorable and romantic, but I also love how that exercise allows them the opportunity to say how they really feel about each other and talk in a way that they could not have accessed any other way. And so, and it comes at a point, a little bit later in the film where their feelings for each other have really intensified. And yeah, that's the one for me.
I was sure thinking about this earlier today that I was going to say the listening booth as well, because it's incredible. Yeah, I have no other options here. Thanks, guys. But the interesting thing too, I noticed this time, I never really thought about it before, but Sam, the kiss follows on the heels of that. And I don't think the kiss happens, at least at that point in the movie, that point in their day, if we don't get the listening booth scene first.
And it
right?
Can't happen in the listening booth either.
No.
That would be as interruptive as a word said.
We need to know, they need to have that shared experience that they both want it, even though they're not directly communicating it. And that's why I think he feels not only like he has to, he needs to do it, but emboldened to actually try. I think it follows the listening booth. So I look back at my Linklater scenes and I thought, again, that would be number 1 or 2. And actually, that was an honorable mention, my first honorable mention. So my number 1 Linklater scene was the one you just mentioned, Scott. It's the fake phone call scene, and it is because of the honesty. And you think about those first dates. Sam, you've mentioned that when you build up the courage to ask someone out. Most of us probably don't have first dates that are quite like this in the movie. They're being pretty open with each other, but you're not open. You're not honest. You're not truly honest on a first date. You're still presenting a version of yourself, the best version you can possibly present. And as honest as they are being with each other, that's the moment where they finally get to really understand how the other feels about them. And they only get to do it through the artifice. They only get to do it through the mechanism of play acting. It's theater. And the other element of it that I love is that she reveals that if she's being honest, the moment she really fell in love with him was when he was telling the story on the train about his grandmother passing away. And the thing is, Linklater, of course, being the one who wrote the script, he shows us that. He tells us that. Go back and watch it. That close-up, when they cut to that reverse shot of her, the camera is just slightly closer. We really haven't seen Delpy quite that close. We haven't seen Delpy that beautiful. There's something about just the way she's tilting her head. It's in the performance too, but between performance and what Linklater has really subtly done with the camera, we see it on her face. We read that that's the moment she's...
We not only see it, but we remember it when she mentions it later that's the moment. We already knew it was the moment.
Yeah. So, time. I was shocked. I don't know why I was shocked by this, because I do love Richard Linklater movies and would have thought, of course, he's going to deal with time. But it's really like the basis of every conversation they have in this film, isn't it?
Every 20 minutes it comes up. I mean, I think the first time is when he's talking about his documentary idea for cable access or whatever.
And I'm thinking about Boyhood, and he'd eventually go on to do something kind of like it.
But it's like, oh yeah, it just hits you, capital T time, and then it comes up over and over again. Yeah, that it's already very much on his mind.
And this space they have, because it's a limited time space, I think that's another reason for the honesty. It frees them up, because they are constricted. They have time barriers, time constraints. And so they're not planning. I mean, they eventually start planning, but they're not planning for date 2, I guess. And there's a freedom in that, but it's all because of the time constriction.
Yeah, I mean, that is the theme of Linklater's career, time and memory. And I think memory is a part of this film as well. But if you think about Linklater's career, the film he did before this was another Dusk Till Dawn movie, was Dazed and Confused, sort of based around his own memories of high school. This happened to him as well, some version of this story. Boyhood is obviously an extension of time, which we're following people in both a real way and almost a documentary way as well, because these are real... The actors are real people who are growing throughout this amount of time. And of course, all these 3 films together, also interesting to think about in terms of time. If you think about the amount of time that Jesse and Celine spend together, it's just very little between the time they spend here, which is certainly less than 24 hours, and then the little bit of time they get in Before Sunset, which is kind of done in real time. the amount of actual time they spend together is very, very small, which might also explain how much they're fighting and before midnight when they get to know each other. And then, of course, with the memory part, I mean, you get at the end of this movie this beautiful montage of all the spaces that they've visited and recontextualized by their relationship. All of these spaces now have a meaning imposed upon them and imposed upon us due to their presence in them. And those spaces are going to be remembered, are going to be burned in their memories. And hopefully, I guess, if we appreciate the movie, burned in ours.
I think that connects with your the opening thing you mentioned, Adam, about the camera phones and the technology. It's when he says, "I'm going to take a picture," and then doesn't. But he stands there. Those are the pictures they might have taken of those spots, Scott, when we get back to it. So, yeah, I like that connects with this.
Selfie sticks at that time, which was...
Well, not only that, but you realize there are the moments when the conversation dies. That's where I was like, I wanted to throw my phone into the equivalent of the Danube, because it's like, we fill those moments. Those are the moments we'd reach for our phone. Or be like, check my texts or check my email. They have to sit in those moments of discomfort. The conversation has kind of gone into a little bit of a lull, and they have to reignite it.
It's a nice bridge.
And it's like
it's like, I like this bridge.
Exactly, we even see that, exactly. I got nothing, but I realized there needs to be something here. How about the bridge? Identifying with those moments in a different way, it's like, we don't do that anymore. And it made me long for those moments, yeah.
There's a really significant small thing that happens in the movie, at least something that I caught when watching it, is when the palm reader comes over and says something to Celine about how she believes in the power of the moment. And I think that's really a critical thing about a film like this, or a film like Dazed and Confused, where it's just, and it's memory based of just like these really critical moments out of time that just stay with you and are so important, and that these two people believe in so sincerely that they're willing to jump off this train, to get off this train together and do something impulsive because they believe in the power of the moment, and they're willing to pursue this moment as passionately as they can, without regard to the consequences, without having caution about the reality that there is an endpoint to all of this, where she's going to get back on a train, he's going to take the plane back to America, and this is going to end. They disregard that thought.
I'm glad that you mentioned memory in addition to time, because I guess enough time had passed since I had last seen this film. I had forgotten about the coda at the end, the post. I kind of thought it ended there at the train station. And the fact that we get Linklater just kind of reminding us of the different spots they hit, but then we also get cuts back to each of them reflecting, and you can imagine in that moment that that's what they're doing, is they're replaying the night. That's their vision, reimagining what they experienced together. So I forgot to do this earlier. You can trust Ethan Hawke is going to have an original idea. We kept overlapping on our favorite scenes, but I did have a chance. Still my favorite interview ever, and it was because of Ethan Hawke 100%. What he gave to the interview. Best conversation I've had on the show a few years back.
That's not with Josh.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well said.
Ethan can win. That's fine.
And at the end of the conversation, we were out of time. And I was going to go through with him these scenes and these moments and just get him to talk about them. But we were out of time, as you'll hear. He still decided to share with us what his favorite moment is in the film. So I think Allie's going to help us out and play it.
There's so much more we could get to. We did our top 5 Linklater scenes a while back, I think, when everybody won some. Rushing out, and I just looking at that list again realized that 4 of my 5 scenes had you in it. And maybe another time we'll be able to go through those. Yeah, I had to do my favorite that I've ever been in is talking Julie to get off the train before sunrise. Oh yeah, telling her that she was going to be a time traveler, and I was going to make her feel better about her present marriage by revealing to her what a loser I was.
He was a loser. That's the thing. Isn't that the big secret of this movie? He almost blows it like a half a dozen times.
At least, yeah. I mean, he's still Ethan Hawke, and I'm going to say that 2-film run with Reality Bites and this, maybe the most gorgeous man ever on screen. So at least that's, my predilections. But, I like that that as well because it brings up the time travel aspect of it. And Sam, you're right that maybe every 20 minutes time is explicitly referenced, but every single conversation is either them thinking about the future, even imagining a future that they may have together, even though I don't think either of them in that moment actually believe that, or they're reflecting on their past, right?
I do think the deflation of Jesse is key to this movie, though. It's really why it works, and but it's not making him into a joke at all. It's allowing him to be a truer sense of himself. It's allowing him to be more than that guy who is telling that time travel story, which is a great one, but it's a bit of a performance, right? And so he needs someone like her who's willing to prod and poke at that affectionately so that he can become more genuine. And then she needs a sparring partner. She needs someone to provide her with some ideas she can push back against. And he's definitely doing that. And in a way, they become this couple that is self-giving, I think Jesse says a couple times when he talks about love, who are giving each other something else that they need. It might just be for these 18 hours or whatever. But Delpy reminded me watching it today of another great 90s woman character, actually, Elaine in Seinfeld. I was getting so many Julia Louis-Dreyfus because especially that one line where he says, "What bothers you?" And she goes, "I hate everything." And it's just like, and then you can see her going off. I was picturing how there's this same sort of gonna take the world on and not worry about the consequences. And he provides her that space to do it for these couple of hours.
Well, I love too that Linklater and his writing partner clearly had learned a few things, but they were still able to write for who these characters were at that time, which were two people that had a lot of ideas and no experience. They were full of shit, basically. When
kind of like us when we started the show.
But when Hawk says something like, "What is love but two selfish people just don't want to be lonely?" I'm like, nope, not actually at all. You're totally wrong. And that's okay. Like, he's 22, 23, and that those characters feel authentic in what they don't know and have only thought about. Yeah, it's just what makes the movie so special.
Well, that's actually a perfect note to go out on, but I'll open it up to the panel here because we do have to, unfortunately, like we ran out of time with Ethan Hawke, we're out of time here to talk about Ethan Hawke in this film. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to impart to the crowd?
Well, let me impart this. This is not even related to Before Sunrise because this is the end of your film festival. When we talk about film discourse, usually the word discourse we put in scare quotes, and I think that as a critic, the best thing that you can do is to inspire curiosity, passion, thought, conversation, deepen the experience for people. And I think that is something that Filmspotting has done throughout its 20 years and continues to do, and has cultivated this extraordinary crowd. And so I just wanted to tip my hat to Filmspotting at 20.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you.
From March, that was our post-screening Filmspotting Fest conversation about Before Sunrise with Scott Tobias and producer Sam, recorded live at Chicago's Music Box Theater. If you'd like to take a look back and learn a little bit about Filmspotting Fest, you can go to filmspotting.net/filmspotting-fest. One more piece of business. These revisits of the first two Before movies, this really is a jam-packed show, Josh. Those revisits were part of our Pantheon project for titles in the Pantheon that have never received a proper review. We're giving them their due. And this is going to be ongoing, tying them in with different anniversaries over the next few years. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, safe to say, still Pantheon worthy, Josh?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. The third film in the trilogy, 2013's Before Midnight, is also in the Pantheon. It was a package deal. That did get a review on the show way back on episode 449. So we can consider its ticket to the Pantheon already punched.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is we are going to consider its ticket punched, but we're also going to take another look at it in 2028. Why not, for its 15th anniversary?
Yeah. As I think I mentioned when we were talking before Sunset, is I can only imagine my appreciation will rise for it as it did for Sunset on a revisit. So it would be fun to do that.
But we felt like we'd be remiss if we didn't use this occasion, all this Pantheon talk, to induct one more film. We're doing a special exemption. We're not going to induct any more Pantheon films until next year when it's time. We've decided that we're not going to willy-nilly induct movies into the Pantheon. There will be a time every year, the same month, when we'll do it. There's a process now, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a special exemption, and this movie is worthy, and we're going to give you its bona fides. That movie is Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood. Why?
You may recognize it as the champion of Filmspotting Madness just a few weeks ago. The best films of this century so far. Yeah, There Will Be Blood came out on top. And what other madness did it win, Adam? Didn't it win a previous tournament?
Back in 2019, it won the Best of the 2000s. So that makes sense, right? If it's going to be the best film of the last 25 years, probably should be the best film of the first 10 years of this quarter century. It also made my list of the top 25 films of the century list. I think it narrowly missed yours, fair to say, Josh?
Yeah, definitely in consideration. And I think it's taken, I don't know how many Filmspotting polls over the years on various subjects whenever it came up, whether that's favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film or, you know, having listeners also vote in these sorts of rankings of the decade. So this is a movie that is routinely revered on the show and would be the obvious pick if we needed a Paul Thomas Anderson film in the Pantheon. I think would be an obvious consensus pick. And yes, I will say that again. We do not have a Paul Thomas Anderson film in the Pantheon, which is a travesty of its own that we are going to be correcting now.
And yet, as obvious as it is, and as obvious as it is to have a PTA movie in it, I know you'd lobby for Phantom Thread. I could lobby for The Master, and I'd even potentially lobby for Boogie Nights. So it's a tough choice, but with those credentials, it has to be There Will Be Blood. It is going into the Pantheon.
I'll be right here.
What is this, your farewell speech?
Going home.
Your farewell to the troops?
I'm not going home, I'm going to Wisconsin.
Have a good trip.
More about the Filmspotting Pantheon is available at filmspotting.net/Pantheon.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Voi non capite niente della Russia.
Allora anche voi non conoscete niente dell'Italia.
Certo, è impossibile per noi poveracci.
E allora come possiamo fare per conoscerci?
Bisogna distruggere le frontiere.
Quali frontiere?
That's from Andrei Tarkovsky's Nostalghia from 1983. It is the final film in our Tarkovsky Marathon and the final Tarkovsky film, Adam, you needed to see to become a completist. We each had different blind spots as part of this marathon, and this was a big one for you, and now you have seen it. The Filmspotting Marathons, we do these about once or twice a year. There are opportunities to do just that, fill in cinematic blind spots. Now, Nostalgia follows chronologically the film we talked about last week, 1979's Stalker. Unlike Stalker, not any metaphysical sci-fi going on. Instead, this is about a Russian writer who is traveling to Italy with a translator to conduct research for a project about an 18th century Russian composer who spent some time in this area of Italy. Nostalgia premiered in competition at the 1983 Cannes Film Festival, where Tarkovsky shared the Best Director prize with another cinematic heavyweight, Robert Bresson, for what ended up being Bresson's final film, L'Argent.
If Letterboxd can be trusted, Josh, it looks like you last saw Nostalgia about 10 years ago, October 2015. Was that in advance of our top 5 Cannes Best Director winners top 5 in November 2015? Or maybe another occasion? At the time you wrote, it would take many viewings to get a more specific handle on Tarkovsky's thematic aims. I think you could write that about every Tarkovsky film, and you could write this as well. Yet I was more than content to simply swim in the movie's mysteries and possibilities. Swim, an apt word, considering all the water imagery. It's not many viewings later. It's just one at this point. So how was your handle on Tarkovsky this time?
Getting there with this one, in those times talking about Stalker, when I referenced other denser works of Tarkovsky, I think I was maybe thinking most about Nostalgia. Perhaps The Sacrifice can be a little bit that way. I think this viewing has helped me understand a little better what I saw hints of in that first viewing, and it's the theme of motherhood. We can maybe spend some time talking about that. I still have questions about that theme, but let's jump back to start, at least by jumping back to our conversation about Stalker, because with that fresh in my mind, and that being my most recent viewing, I noticed that Nostalgia, in a way, has a version of The Room that is in Stalker. I don't think this is the dominant theme, but it is interesting that it's there. And it's actually there at the start when we do see the interpreter, played by Domiziana Giordano, going into this chapel. It looks like some sort of chapel, and she's observing what's going on, and the sacristan working there, I think she asks him what's supposed to happen here, and he says, whatever you like, whatever you need most. And right there I was like, oh, wow, we're discussing The Room. And then he says, how about this? But you should at least kneel down, which connects to, the idea I floated out there about The Room being where you encounter the divine. I like how he also says that earlier on there, he says if there are casual lookers, meaning her, at the chapel, nothing happens. So it's kind of like, how serious, what is the faith of the professor and the writer in Stalker? And then there's that bizarre visit that the poet, this main character, makes to this abandoned abbey, San Galgano. And as he's wandering around this edifice with no roof, nothing in the windows, grass growing on the ground, but it has this, the structure of an abbey, we hear a man and a woman talking about the man seeking God, but God not responding. And so, these are all through lines to what I think is the main concern of Stalker and a side concern here. But definitely, because we watch and discuss Stalker, I feel like I was able to draw that out a little bit more. So that's where I was at with this second viewing. But for your first viewing, was there something that stood out to you as a prominent or preeminent concern of all the things Tarkovsky is dipping his toes in with this film?
Well, before I try to answer that, I mentioned earlier the coincidence spotting of watching this film after watching and also talking about Before Sunset and Sunrise on this show. It is not just the nostalgia thing. What did it for me, Josh, was at some point seeing a close-up of Domiziana Giordano, Eugenia, as you mentioned, and seeing that strawberry blonde hair, the curly long lock. She's doing something with her hair, and it was like I was looking at Julie Delpy from Before Sunset and Sunrise. And they're having these philosophical conversations as they're kind of sitting and strolling around, and he's a writer, like Jesse's a writer. And I was just flashing back to Sunset and Sunrise as I was watching this movie, even being in a foreign country for the writer in this case as well. So that was in my mind as I was watching this film. But what was really in my mind watching it as the culmination of this marathon was how perfect it was. Whether or not it's the last film from Tarkovsky, it's not. We have The Sacrifice. It is a perfect closing film to this marathon because the opening of this movie is a kind of Tarkovsky 101. We have this shot where you've got this misty haze, fog sweeping across. You've used this word. I think I've used it before, maybe back when we talked about mirror, like something's been conjured that is sweeping across the landscape. We have a pond, so we've got the water. Got to have that. We have a dog, and we have a white horse They're all there.
Yeah.
All our main characters are here. We also have actual people, and they're doing that thing that Tarkovsky characters often do and do a lot in this film, which is looking back at the camera, looking at us, often kind of breaking the fourth wall. And it gives us that sense of the point of view of a dreamer, the point of view of someone who is having a memory. And it even ends with a freeze frame. And this is something Tarkovsky has done in other films, and he's done in other films in this marathon. Now, I can't completely rely on my notes here, but I know that in other films I have written down, wait a second, is that a freeze frame there? And I went back to my notes for Stalker, and I swear to God, in my notes for Stalker, I have, does it freeze frame on them just before the rain? And then I went back to Andrei Rublev, and Josh, I would not have copied and pasted this for any reason. It says, does it freeze frame on them just before the rain? So is it possible that exactly the same moment there's a freeze frame before rain starts to fall in those two films? And here again, he uses a freeze frame. So it's all of these Tarkovsky images and ideas kind of commingling just at the beginning of the film. And it's haunting and it's beautiful. And I felt like I was right in the headspace I needed to be in at the beginning of this film. The other thing that I guess I'm going to keep harping on because he is going to keep harping on it, the character of the Holy Fool, that this movie is largely built around.
Yeah.
We meet Domenico, and here we get a great definition of it. I think if you're going to ask ultimately what Tarkovsky means by the Holy Fool, we have the main character, Andrei Gorchakov. We have his definition, what he says to Eugenia. He says they're troublesome, inconvenient, they're alone, but they're certainly closer to the truth. I think that goes for Andrei Rublev. That goes for the main character in Stalker. It goes for other characters that we've seen throughout this entire marathon. And isn't that ultimately, by the end of this film, we're going to jump ahead. We have to get to the end of this film. By the end of this movie, isn't that ultimately what we see Gorchakov become? Now, what happens to our actual Holy Fool, the character who starts as our Holy Fool? Well, that's a pretty awful demise.
Yeah,
and
horrific.
The way Tarkovsky depicts it is horrific. In the sound design, he cuts out the music, Beethoven at one point, to give us the screams. We hear the screams of pain as he has self-immolated. And yet Tarkovsky finds a way to go from something terrible, something brutal, to something kind of beautiful, the flames that have engulfed him, to the flame of the candle, almost a match cut, the flame of the candle that Andrei is holding, as he is now going to try to do what Domenico asked him to do, which is show his faith, walk across the water with this candle. And at first I thought, is this another case of Tarkovsky asking us as an audience to have a certain amount of faith ourselves? Because it seems like he's walking across the water pretty easily, but we don't see his legs and we don't really see a wide shot. And so is he doing it or is he not doing it? And then you realize, well, okay, it's all dried up. And so there's really no water there. And so it's a little bit of an easy way out, but it's not so much of an easy way out because he still has to walk across and keep that flame intact. And I don't know how long that sequence is, but it feels like I didn't have time to go back and time it, Josh.
7
minutes. It's a long
minutes.
Sequence. Okay, 7 minutes. It feels
Single
like an
take.
unbroken take. Has to be an unbroken take, right? We have to experience that entire journey. That has to feel like his entire lifespan shrunken down to 7 minutes, and it does.
Yeah.
And as he walks across, he ultimately gets across, and I think in that moment does finally prove that he believes, proves his faith. And for me, that ending felt to me as close to the pinnacle or the ideal of a Tarkovsky ending as you could possibly have.
It's an astonishing sequence that is comprised of, yes, little more than this man trudging across the length of a drained natural pool with a candle, hoping it won't go out because of the wind coming through or whatever. Yeah, this would have been my scene of the year if it came out in 1983. It's just one of these sustained but quiet instances of slow cinema, being mesmerized by that, and you get lost in the effort. You get time takes on a different meaning if you allow yourself to give into it. Is it him expressing his faith? I can see that. I'm still uncertain of what's going on in that scene, even though I submit to its power. I think that would make sense. This is something the Holy Fool has asked him to do. It is something that he didn't do. I forget if he tells him at one point that he did it before he's done it.
He suggests that he's done it. He suggests that he's done it. He hasn't. So he's circling back to follow through on something he promised, which is interesting. And yeah, maybe this is him entering the room to bring it back to Stalker, is by doing this, he's taking that step that the writer and the professor wouldn't take. So that coincides with what you're talking about in terms of an expression of faith. So yeah, I like that, but it is also his last. I read it as his last gesture on Earth because I do too, and that supports my theory to me.
Yeah,
that makes it that expression, that ultimate expression of faith.
It also transports him to, because it's not literally the final scene. What we then get is that, like, it is a freeze frame shot, I think, but the camera is still pulling back.
It pulls back, yeah.
Again, one of these definitive Tarkovsky images that, if you just Google his name, it's one of the images that will come up of the poet. We're in black and white now. We haven't really talked about the shifts too much of color in black and white, but we're in black and white, which has been suggested to be his visions or dreams or memories. And the shack we've seen in these visions and dreams and memories is there, yet it is somehow inside this abandoned abbey I've described. Which, quick note, and speaking of, as it came up earlier in the show, Debbie and I are off on a 30th anniversary trip. 10th anniversary trip was to Italy, and we went to this abbey, San Galgano Abbey. Yeah, it is one of the most unsettling places I've been on Earth, in the sense that you don't know what it's supposed to be, because it has this edifice. It is an abbey, but it looks like a cathedral. It wasn't a cathedral. It was, a place where monks worshiped and lived, but it has the edifice of a massive cathedral. And yet nature has taken over inside, and there's no roof. And it's just so perfect that a place like that would show up in a Tarkovsky movie, because it exists here on Earth, but it seems like it'd be one of these art installations he would create for one of his movies. At any rate, at this shot, we have the poet sitting in the middle of this abbey. Miniature work had to be involved to pull this off. And he's sitting there with the dog, again, looking at the camera. Snow begins to fall. So here's the question, as you described the earlier image like that. If he's been the viewer previously in these visions, when characters look back, we assume they're looking back at him, even though they're looking at us. Now he is looking at us. Is that... I think we talked about this in Stalker. Is that the point where Tarkovsky is now challenging us? What are you going to do with this presence that's been presented to you? What is your response going to be? Is that what the poet is saying to us as the only viewers left? But also, where is he now? Is he in his memories? Is he in his visions? Because we both read it as that he has died in that pool.
Yes.
So thematically, there's so many possibilities, but it's just as a composition of its own, it's a masterwork.
Well, yeah, just purely as a composition, you're exactly right. But I'm reading it as he is transcending whatever plane of existence he's on when he's in the pool. He is into another realm, whatever you want to characterize that realm as, whatever name you want to put on it. I do associate it, I suppose, with a sort of heaven, in the sense that it seems to be based on how we can find parallels with the other imagery, and with the dog there, and the water, and the home. It feels like it's his childhood home. It feels like it's that nostalgic, warm place. Now, I don't know what to do with the Abbey and what it's wrapped in. I don't fully, but it feels like it is comforting to him in that moment. Yeah. And so that's why I read that whole ending as a positive thing from a faith perspective.
And you have to also read these visions as memories of his childhood, right? Because I was wondering, is this his wife that he's seen, or is this his mother? And of course, that's a tricky question,
it could
because
be both
in
at
Mirror,
different points. Yeah.
In Mirror, there's a figure where it's the same actress plays the main figure's ex-wife and mother. So yeah, so that's hard to say, but I think I lean with you, as these are memories of childhood,
right,
and a childhood home. And yeah, another thing I was going to point out is, you were in one of these visions, the use of camera work here. We have these women figures. I think there's 3 of them that they're looking at the camera, and the camera is kind of tracking sideways across their faces. And this is a trick Tarkovsky has pulled in other films too, where an actor will look at the camera and then the camera slides past them to meet another actor. They must run behind the camera to position themselves in the scene further. So as the camera continues to track, they reappear.
Yeah.
And it seems this goes back to The Conjuring and the breaking of temporal space. We're like, wait a minute, they were just to my left.
He does it with Andrei in Domenico's dwelling too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a subtle, effective trick. And then in that same shot, it comes to a still point, and the horse is in there and the dog is in there. I could have sworn, to your question about the freeze frame, somehow they managed to freeze frame the horse. So we see that the women, either wind is blowing their hair or they move a little bit. The dog moves its position. But if you notice, the horse in the background has completely frozen. Why? How? Who knows? But the immediate effect is like, we're in a time and space that we've never been in before.
Yeah, this entire film feels that way. You said that as you were setting this up, right? And there are no traditional sci-fi elements. This isn't a science fiction film. It definitely is not, and certainly not in the way Stalker is or Solaris is. And yet, you are in all of these liminal spaces. The entire film is a liminal space. At one point, to go back to what you said too about time and space breaking down, remember, he thinks it's time for lunch and she says it's 7 a.m. We have no sense. We as viewers, the characters, have no sense of what time it is. And yes, I had in my notes, the camera pans left and all of a sudden you're in a different place. The characters are in different places within the room. The fog coming in. The way when the camera moves, you have characters who are in that water in the canal and they're perfectly still. It feels like an alien landscape almost. You have mist oozing up from the ground, right? So there is something that feels alien about it, and you have to almost wonder, like in Stalker, what kind of world are we in? Is this the world of the mind? Is it an imaginary place? Is it some kind of dystopia? Honestly, is it? Who knows? It doesn't feel like the real world, even though there are aspects of it that feel very much like our everyday world. But all of the characters are fluctuating within it and within this time and space, which is why when Tarkovsky breaks it in various ways and shocks us, it's so striking. One of those moments is when Eugenia goes into the church, and that, I don't know what you exactly call it, not a statue, but Mother Mary is before her.
Yeah, they call it the Madonna of childbirth, I think.
The Madonna of childbirth. Yeah. And when that woman kneels down in front of her and the gown opens and those birds fly
Incredible.
out. Right? I mean, it's a stunner. And as if that wasn't stunning enough, the next shot is the feathers from the birds cascading down, floating down on top of the candles. That is also gorgeous. And then we get to
right, that's
the
real
hotel.
World. Like
that's
you
real
feel
world,
like
right.
that could happen, right?
Exactly.
But it's tiptoeing towards things where you're like, how could that ever happen?
Right. So yeah, I guess if you want to use these words, it's secular and spiritual colliding, which that collision seems to happen all of the time in these films. And then we get to the hotel, and I know, especially coming off of Stalker, this is kind of almost silly to say, but what filmmaker, and I'm going to say even better than Kubrick, what filmmaker uses rooms and uses doorways better?
Yeah.
Uses
his hotel room.
Uses doorways like they're portals to other worlds all the time. They're constantly these imposing forces behind, almost almost imposing forces behind characters as they're talking. We feel the presence behind them, like they're drawing them in. Or what about that shot? I think it's when he's going into Domenico's home for the first time, and he parts the doors. They're like barn doors that he parts. And when he does, what's on the other side? Black and white. He's going into a dream. He's going into a memory when he opens that door. That's that reality and fantasy or memory world directly there colliding with each other. But then when we go into the hotel, that room that he is in, Josh, with that bed in the middle and the light on the window and the bathroom on each side of it. Here again, I'm going to say nothing sci-fi about it directly. And yet it almost feels like something out of 2001. The way the bathroom is bathed in that white sterile light, and the way the rain is coming in through the window. And then, of course, talk about memory world and reality clashing with each other. All sorts of weird stuff starts to happen over the course of that long shot.
I think that shot, if you wanted to give a shot to maybe explain Tarkovsky, you might choose that, even though it's not quite as bravura as the final one. Mm-hmm. It's this art installation idea where he places the camera and lets the production design and the lighting, that light you described in the bathroom, shifts a little bit. And I noticed this time the window to the left of the bed, it's raining outside, as you said, and the way it's raining on the wall beyond, of the building beyond, it kind of makes the paint of that building peel off and fall down. So it's almost this, esoteric art piece. You're just watching shapes and colors change. And then the water is not only coming through the window, but it's seeping through the floor in a way. All of a sudden there's a puddle by the bed. And then this is probably where you were going, but suddenly the dog comes out of the bathroom.
Shows up. Yeah.
It's the same dog from the black and white visions and calmly walks to the side of the bed and lays down. And I love how the poet, I think this is the touch that connects it to a temporal space, because initially we might be thinking, well, that's maybe another dog. What's going on? We're trying to stay in the real world. He just gently reaches out his hand and strokes the dog. So it's, even though it shouldn't be there, he should be concerned about this. That links the dog, not only because it's the same kind of dog, but to his memories because of his response to it. It's like he's drifting off now into this dream or this vision. And the dog we've talked about the dog in Stalker, the dog has led him there.
Yeah.
Or the dog represents, in that case, you talked about how the dog represents this really happened because he came out of the zone. Here, the dog is like, well, something metaphysical is really happening because I came out of the metaphysical into the real world.
The dog almost brings him back into the scene because the way it's lit, it feels like Andrei is sinking into the bed.
It's so dark.
Into the darkness. He's disappearing. And you feel like he might actually be disappearing, like some kind of magic act is happening as we're watching it. A couple other small touches that I noticed. Throughout the marathon, we've referenced a few times the birches. I think we both probably assumed that for them to be a recurring motif, that there had to be something in his childhood that he was fond of, and he liked to include that image. And we have a line here where a character says, the birches, he loves the birches and the air of my childhood. So he must have grown up around them. There's a lot of autobiographical elements in all of his films, but here, like Mir, he even references the poet, his father, Tarkovsky. So we have that. I think
she's reading his poems, right?
Exactly.
I believe Eugenia is reading his father's poems.
Tarkovsky. I think we can take him at his word here. This character, even though it is a character, that those birches are something from his childhood. And this is maybe even, I was going to say maybe it's unintentional, but I don't think it is. It's just too good. I love when Domenico says to Andrei when they're talking, Andrei takes out a cigarette and Domenico says something like, I also smoke when I don't know what to say. And you realize how often, even in movies, that's exactly what a cigarette is, right? A cigarette is such a perfect diversion. It allows you to buy time. That's how they function. When you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, you can at least stall and light up a cigarette. And later, after Eugenia has said on the phone to him, I have a boyfriend now. I have my man, Vittorio. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. There's a pretty good sense that isn't that happy of a relationship anyway, just based on how that scene is shot and how cold and detached he seems. But what happens at the very end of that scene, the camera is fixated on her, but we know she's talking to him and there's no sound. There's nothing coming from him whatsoever. He doesn't seem to really even notice her. And what does she say? She says, I'm going to go out and buy some cigarettes. And it felt to me like a direct callback to that scene where it's her saying, clearly we have nothing to say to each other. And all she can think to do is go out and get some cigarettes.
Yeah, she's really good throughout. She kind of fades away from the film a little bit in the middle section. But I think, I'm not sure if we've mentioned Oleg Yankovsky as Andrei, this main character, a hard part, I would think, to pull off, where you're not responding much. So much of this is taking place in his head, yet he's compelling enough on his own as this figure to hold our attention, our interest, and our sympathy. And especially he's able to pull off that long take at the end where it has to be all about his physicality and his perseverance, right? He doesn't say anything there. And then Domenico, who you were describing, the holy fool here, Erland Josephson, who would later star in Tarkovsky's The Sacrifice, playing this somewhat wild character, but I also love, he's notorious, this character, Domenico, for having locked his family up years before. I think, was it 7 years, did they say?
7 years.
Yeah, 7 years, because it's unclear. He thought it was the end of the world, or was he just jealous because some man was looking at his wife and he didn't want her to be around men, but he locks his entire family up. We get a black and white flashback to when the family escapes the home.
We do.
And that, I think, ties us more closely to Domenico as a sympathetic character and not just this raving lunatic. So, and Josephson's performance, of course, helps with that. And as you were mentioning the autobiographical stuff, just thought probably worth noting, and this is tied to the theme of motherhood we've touched on here and there. Clearly, the Madonna of Childbirth statue sequence at the beginning is tied to that. But at the end of this film, dedicated to the memory of my mother. So, clearly a primary concern of Nostalgia is not only this general notion of motherhood, but specifically Tarkovsky's mother as well.
Nostalgia is currently available VOD. My Tarkovsky rank list should be coming in hot on Letterboxd. Do you already have yours there, Josh?
Oh, no, because I got to give some time. With, having these, it's tougher than it was before, and not just because now I've seen every film.
We will have one more bit of Tarkovsky business to attend to when you get back from your trip. We have to share, as we conclude every marathon, we have to share our Tarkovsky awards. We need a name. I'm going to throw out the Birches. But
Birches are
Holy
Fools. I mean, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of got to be the Holy Fools.
It may have to be the Holy Fools, but you know what? We'll still take other suggestions, and we need our special category. It seems obvious to go with something like just even the single shot, best image.
Yeah. That might be a good one to kind of force us to really narrow in. I mean, we've talked about water so much. It could be water image if we wanted to at least give ourselves some constraints, but a couple places we could go.
Email us, feedback@filmspotting.net, with your suggestions. And if you would like to learn more about this marathon or past marathons, I think this is our 51st. You can visit filmspotting.net/marathons. Josh, that is our show.
If you want to connect with us on social media, you can find Adam and the show at Instagram and Facebook and Letterboxd. He's at Filmspotting. I'm at those places as well as Larson on Film. We are independently produced and listener supported. You can support the show by joining the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com. That way you can listen early. You can also listen ad-free. Sam puts out a weekly newsletter. We record monthly bonus episodes, and you can get access to the entire show archive. If you're interested in show t-shirts or any other merch, you can go to filmspotting.net/shop.
In that Filmspotting archive, Lotso Linklater, last year's Hitman, 970, Apollo 10.5, 867, Where'd You Go, Bernadette, 741, Everybody Wants Some, 581, Boyhood, that was a Filmspotting Fix episode dedicated just to Boyhood, Before Midnight, 449, Bernie, 399, and more. Out streaming this weekend, Fear Street, Prom Queen. The It Girls are fighting to win Prom Queen, but when someone new enters the race, others start to disappear. Without a Trace. Susanna Sohn from Red Rocket, Ariana Greenblatt from Barbie, Lily Taylor, and Catherine Waterston star. Also, Fountain of Youth. Treasure hunter John Krasinski and estranged sister Natalie Portman assemble a team for an adventure in search of the object, the location of the title. We'll have to see, or not, Josh. It's directed by Guy Ritchie on Apple TV+. You going to fit that in before heading off to Japan?
I mean, sort of sounds like a plain movie, but I don't know how the logistics of that work.
I like Sam's note here. Does this movie actually exist? Impossible to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I know you're curious about this one. Pee-wee as Himself, a 2-part documentary about Paul Pee-wee Herman Rubens. That's on Max.
Yeah, very interesting.
Limited, you can see Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. An aspiring author finds herself in some Austen-esque romantic entanglements at a writer's retreat. It'd be weird if they were Dostoevsky-esque. Aaron Newworth, our friend, says a charming French romantic comedy. Out Wide, Lilo and Stitch, the live-action edition directed by Dean Fleischer Camp, who directed Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning is the big dog, though, out this weekend. Tom Cruise has reckoned for the last time, or so we are led to believe. Next week, Michael Phillips is here. M.I., The Final Reckoning, and our top 5 movie stunts.
Filmspotting is produced by Golden Joe Dassault and Sam Van Hallgren. Without Sam and Golden Joe, this show wouldn't go. Our production assistant is Sophie Kempenaar. Special thanks to everyone at WBEZ Chicago. More information is available at WBEZ.org. For Filmspotting, I'm Josh Larson.
And I'm Adam Kempenaar. Thanks for listening.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Filmspotting is listener supported. Join the Filmspotting family at filmspottingfamily.com and get access to ad-free episodes, monthly bonus shows, our weekly newsletter, and for the first time, all in one place, the entire Filmspotting archive going back to 2005. That's at filmspottingfamily.com.